Good evening, everyone. My name is Gloria, and I am here with my co-interpreter, Joel, who is sitting right back there. And we are also very happy to be joining with interpretation with our ASL interpreters as well for tonight. Entonces, Joel y yo vamos a estar interpretando del inglés al español esta noche. Y para ello vamos a usar un equipo de interpretación. Entonces es posible que vean algunas personas con algunos dispositivos y unos audífonos, y es porque están escuchando la interpretación al español. And so Joel and I are going to be interpreting from English to Spanish, and for that we're going to be using equipment. So it's possible that you are going to see people with some equipment, some receivers, and then also some headphones, and that is because you are listening to the interpretation. Entonces, antes de empezar, queremos compartir con ustedes algunas pautas para crear un espacio multilingüe, ya que es la responsabilidad de todos nosotros, no solamente nosotros, los intérpretes y los panelistas, sino también la audiencia para crear este espacio. And so before we get started with tonight's program, we want to share with you some guidelines to create a multilingual space, because it's not just our responsibilities as interpreters or the panelists' responsibilities, but everyone, including the audience, to create a multilingual space. Bien, una de las cosas que queremos compartir con ustedes es que hay veces que estamos hablando de un tema que nos emociona bastante y hablamos un poco muy rápido. Si eso pasa, nosotros les vamos a hacer una señal desde allá arriba para decirles que por favor hablen un poco más despacio. Haremos esta señal que justo hoy aprendimos de nuestros intérpretes de señas, que significará por favor hablen más despacio. And so something that happens sometimes when we're sharing about something that really we are very passionate about is that we start speaking rather fast. If that's the case, we are going to do this sign to let the speaker know to please slow down, which is actually the sign to slow down in ASL, which we just learned today. Si nos ven a hacer esta señal, les vamos a pedir a ustedes como audiencia que por favor lo hagan con nosotros para que la persona que esté hablando o se esté comunicando tome nota y también pueda hacer los ajustes necesarios. If you as the audience members see us doing that kind of sign, we're going to ask you to please do it with us so the speaker or the person who's communicating can please take note and slow down. También otra cosa que les vamos a pedir es que como cuando a veces estamos en conversación y estamos platicando, es posible que hablemos sobre otra persona. Si eso pasa, nosotros como intérpretes no queremos privilegiar una voz sobre la otra, ya que no podemos interpretar para ambas personas a la vez. Entonces, si eso pasa, les vamos a hacer esta señal para indicar que por favor hablen una persona a la vez. De nuevo, si nos van a hacer esta señal, les vamos a pedir a ustedes que también lo hagan con nosotros. Something else that sometimes tends to happen when we're having a lively conversation is that we kind of start speaking over another. If that happens, we're going to make this sign to let you know to please speak one person at a time, because as interpreters, we don't want to privilege one voice over the other, because we cannot interpret for both people at the same time. Again, if you see us doing a sign, we're going to ask you to do it with us so the speaker can take note. So let's go ahead and practice that right now. If we do this sign, what are you guys going to do? Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. Y bueno, también otra cosa importante de recordar es que cuando hay interpretación, siempre va a haber un retraso para las personas que están escuchando esa interpretación. Entonces les vamos a pedir a los ponentes o a las personas que se están comunicando que por favor tomen una pausa de 3 segundos antes de cambiar de ponentes o también antes de darle a la persona que va a responder a la pregunta un tiempito para respirar y para que nosotros los intérpretes podamos terminar interpretando la pregunta completa y no haya un retraso mayor. So another thing that happens is that the people that receive interpretation are always going to receive the message a few seconds slower because we're going to be interpreting. We're going to ask the people that are communicating or the speakers to please pause after said message or after asking a question to ensure that the people who are listening to interpretation can receive the information or the message or the question completely before giving another person the ability to respond. También otra cosa importante es que si se están comunicando y no podemos entenderles muy bien o una persona está hablando, es posible que nosotros hagamos esta señal para indicarle a esa persona que hable un poco más alto para que podamos entenderles mejor. Another thing that tends to happen is that sometimes we can't hear very well the person who's speaking, and if that's the case, we're going to be doing this sign to let people know to please speak up so we can hear you a little bit better. Again, if you see us doing this sign, we're going to ask you to please do it with us so the person can take note. Y bueno, eso es todo. Si ustedes están usando el equipo de interpretación, por favor recuerden de entregar ese equipo a mí o a Joel o también a la mesa de enfrente en donde lo recogieron. And I think that is pretty much it. If you are listening to interpretation and you have equipment, please remember to return that equipment to either myself or Joel or the person up in the front table that you got it from. Eso es todo. Espero que puedan disfrutar el programa de esta noche. That is all. I hope that you can enjoy tonight's evening programming. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for that. And we're glad to have both our interpreters here for ASL and Spanish. Welcome to the New School for those of you all who are visiting. I'm Mike Harrington, and I am the Director of Sustainability Engagement here at the New School and at the Tishman Environment and Design Center. And I am also a doctoral student here at the New School. And upon entering, a lot of you may have seen there's some camping going on in our lobby, and a lot of our classmates are here as a sign of solidarity with students at NYU Uptown, NYU across the park, Columbia Uptown, and all across the country who are protesting in support of the Palestinian people. For those of you who are familiar with the New School, that should not come as a surprise to you. Our institution's values align very much with social justice, and this event itself is about environmental justice, a field which challenges the systemic oppression and is all about empowerment of frontline and Indigenous communities. I acknowledge and support the right of my classmates and fellow students across the country to speak out against the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which is tied to many struggles, including the ones for climate and environmental justice. As I like to remind myself, não existe luta sozinha, which translates roughly to no struggle exists by itself. So before we begin, I would like to remind you all to silence your phones or set them to vibrate. This building is ADA compliant, so if you need to use the restrooms, they should be accessible. We have our ASL interpreter here, and we have our wonderful Spanish interpreters as well. And we also have a QR code up for the question and answer part of the program. So if you need a note card, a number of my colleagues here can help you. So all of my colleagues who are here, could you stand up and raise your hand if you need? So they can help you get some of the note cards, and we have them in both English and Spanish. But we do encourage you to use the QR code because that would be quicker, and if you're able to. And now, if you need any help, you can also reach out to my same colleagues. And I would like to welcome the Provost of the New School, Dr. Renee White, to provide our opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. Good evening. I want to welcome you all to tonight's event. It is our pleasure to host you both here on our campus in New York City and also online, so welcome all. Before we get started with this important gathering, we would like to acknowledge with respect the Indigenous people on whose ancestral lands the New School now stands. We are gathered on the unceded land of the Lenape peoples. We ask you to join us in acknowledging the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. The new school also acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land this institution is located. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. All right. So the new school is deeply committed to collaborative and interdisciplinary research and scholarship on the most pressing issues of the day, which of course includes addressing climate and environmental justice issues. There is important work taking place across the university related to these topics, from the work of our centers, including, of course, the Tishman Center and also the Urban Systems Lab, to our Masters of Science in Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management at the Milano School of Policy, Management, and Environment in the Schools of Public Engagement, to our undergraduate program in Environmental Studies housed in both the Schools of Public Engagement as well as Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts, to the work being done on sustainable fashion and fashion practices at Parsons. So underpinning all that we do at the New School is a staunch commitment to equity, inclusion, and social justice, and we refer to it as EISJ. These values are deeply ingrained in our history, mission, and vision, and must always be at the center of how we approach research, scholarship, and creative practice at the university. Since joining the New School as provost almost 3 years ago, can you believe that? Almost 3 years ago, I've worked well with colleagues across the university to advance our commitment to EISJ and to ensure that we as a community are acting out of these values in our daily work. And at the end of the day, these issues are intersectional and require an interdisciplinary lens of analysis and discourse, an approach to learning that we value across all our colleges. Collectively, the New School is proud to challenge convention through courage, creativity, and cooperation. So conversations like these are central to our mission of generating positive change for the future. And so for all of these reasons, if I do say so myself, this evening event is very, very New School. So I'm enthusiastic, of course, that the news organizations Grist and Mother Jones have partnered with the Tishman Environment and Design Center at the New School to co-produce this critical conversation about equity, justice, infrastructure, jobs, and much more. What an honor we have tonight to join these legendary climate and justice leaders who will help us to better understand how the green transition can be equitable in all our communities. And I'm from the Bronx, so I know just how important that really is. Boogie down, all right. I reference it whenever I can. So we definitely want to thank our partners, Grist and Mother Jones, and are really excited and pleased to be a space where we're welcoming this important work. Grist, a nonprofit independent media organization since 1999, has been dedicated to highlighting climate solutions and uncovering environmental injustices. Mother Jones is a nonprofit investigative news organization formed in 1976 that focuses its coverage on politics, voting rights, racial justice, the environment, and many other issues. My colleague, Dr. Bautista, will share more about the Tishman Center shortly. But first, I want to recognize and offer thanks to our event supporters. So this event has brought together some key supporters, such as Fry Vineyards, New York's Public Radio, WNYC, Free Speech TV, Patagonia, and American Farmland Trust. So now I have the pleasure of recognizing one of the event supporters, American Farmland Trust. Joining us here today to share a few words about the organization is Nicole Grisheri. Now, Nicole leads American Farmland Trust's program called Women for the Land in the Southeast. So I just want to, there you are. I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for being a supporter.
Hi, good evening. Again, my name is Nicole Guashiri, and I'm the Women for the Land Southeast Program Manager at American Farmland Trust. I am excited to welcome you to this evening's talk with leading voices in the environmental justice movement, a movement that has inspired many in this room and that shares history with the movement that formed our organization over 40 years ago. Let me introduce you to American Farmland Trust and some of the work we are doing right here in New York to keep farmers on their land. American Farmland Trust was founded in 1980 with assistance from farmers, ranchers, and environmentalists, and they all agreed that it is important to protect the land they loved. Our approach has been the same ever since: to protect agricultural land, to promote environmentally sound practices, and to keep farmers on their land. Today, we are a leading research organization that also implements practices on the ground. We are a farmer-focused organization that is ushering a new generation of farmers and improving resources and support of the most underserved farmers, specifically women, folks of the global majority, and LGBTQIA+ farmers. We have over 40 years of experience working at the intersection of agriculture and environment with one goal in mind. As our saying goes, no farms, no food. While we are a nationwide organization, we also work right here in New York. Since 1990, AFT has worked in New York State to raise awareness of farmland issues and solve them at the local, regional, and state level. One of our programs, New York Farms to Institution, New York State, Finesse, is a collaborative initiative led by AFT to dramatically expand the volume of locally grown food from New York farms served in institutions such as primary and secondary schools, universities, and hospitals. We believe that transforming the local food economy requires systemic change and collaborative efforts from those working across the supply chain, including experts in agriculture, public health, economic development, environmental justice, food justice, education, and other industries. The Finesse team at American Farmland Trust leads policy efforts to bolster the local economy and support farm viability through expanding local foods to institutions across this state. This is just one way that AFT has joined the movement for food security and environmental justice in this region. Another program that we have and that I lead in the Southeast is our Women for the Land program. Peer-to-peer learning happens on farms, and these non-traditional and non-hierarchical learning circles have been influenced by Indigenous learning circles and other social and environmental justice movements across the world. Activating community leadership, relationships, and leadership development, these circles serve as events to give women and non-binary folks safe spaces to learn and to receive resources in a way that they have historically not had access to. Participants receive relevant information with specific audiences in mind, whether that's Black women farmers in the Southeast, Indigenous and veteran women farmers in the Pacific Northwest, or Latinx farmers in California. Programming in New York has happened in the western part of our state, and we have partnered with organizations like Cornell Extension, New York FarmNet, and more. And we look forward to continuing to build momentum in this space and promote resources to address climate change, land access, and land tenure. In closing, I am excited to hear this distinguished panel discussing the state of environmental justice tonight because it intersects so closely with the work that I do at American Farmland Trust. Whether we have before or not, we now need to realize the common ground between these movements and their shared future. No farms, no food, no future. So thank you for allowing me to introduce AFT tonight, and please visit us at farmland.org or scan the QR code on our slides. If you have any questions, I have some of my colleagues who are here tonight, and we would love to talk to you further about American Farmland Trust. And thank you so much for the panelists, the New School, and to Mother Jones and Grist for putting this together tonight. Thank you.
Okay, it's a long buildup, but I promise it's going to be worth it. All right, everyone, I'm Ana Baptista. I'm the co-director for the Tishman Environment and Design Center, along with my co-director, Joel Towers, who's here this evening. And we're your co-host for this evening's event. For those of you who are not familiar with the Tishman Center, we've been around for almost 20 years. We're a university-wide center at the New School. And we serve essentially as a hub for collaborative research, policy, and design to address the root causes of climate change and environmental injustice. We work closely with environmental justice partners, many of whom are here this evening, to build a better model for university community partnerships and really help advance environmental justice. Our vision of the future of environmental justice is a world free of racism, in balance with nature, and with care and respect for all beings. So it's important to note that we are hosting this evening's event at a time of great political upheaval around the world and on our campuses across the country. Tonight's event is a reminder of how important intersectional social movements for peace, liberation, justice, and human rights are to our collective flourishing. Environmental justice is a radical dream of freedom. And the EJ, yes. And the EJ and climate justice movements, along with our students and communities here and across the globe, they're keeping this dream alive. They're reminding us of our solidarity with communities around the world struggling to be free from all forms of oppression. And I wanted to share an open letter for humanity and justice in Palestine and Israel that was penned by our friends at Solidaire. We have Vinny here, the executive director, who's also our advisory committee member for the Tishman Center. And in this letter, they remind us about the importance of social movements. They say, social movements are extraordinary in their capacity to respond to violence with steadfastness and imagination, and mobilize people to transform oppressive realities. Alongside them, we envision a world where Palestinians live with freedom, dignity, and equality, with true safety for Israeli and Palestinian people, and a just peace in the region. In the face of so much pain and suffering, we call forth our deepest sense of humanity and justice to build this possibility together, because we know that none of us are free until all of us are free. So we need environmental justice and climate justice now more than ever. We need people of conscience standing together to build this new world. So it is in this spirit that we are honored to co-host this event with our partners, Mother Jones and Grist, and to welcome 3 incredible leaders who each bring their whole hearts and lives into the work of realizing environmental justice. Dr. Bob Bullard, Jade Begay, and Leah Thomas, thank you for joining us tonight, truly. Yes. And I have the honor of also introducing our moderator for this evening, Nikal Swaminathan, who is Grist's Chief Executive Officer. Nikal led Grist's environmental justice coverage before moving on to build and manage Grist's newsroom. Additionally, he established Grist's Environmental Justice Desk and was instrumental in launching Grist's Indigenous Affairs Desk. He built a talented and diverse staff while dramatically increasing the representation of people of color on the editorial team. And under his leadership, Grist expanded its reach and garnered a number of honors, including awards from the Online Journalism Awards, Edward R. Murrow Awards, and the National Magazine Awards. So thank you for being our moderator this evening, patiently waiting to get us started. And I'm going to ask our panelists to also come up on stage so we can get started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the excellent introduction. I'm so excited to be able to moderate this panel tonight, and I just want to start off with one note, personal and professional note. This is a personal and professional family affair for me. My wife has worked at Mother Jones for approaching 17 years, and one of Grist's longest-serving board members, Michelle DePass, who made it out here all the way from California, is a former director of the Tishman Center. So just, it's a small world after all. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's panelists. The first panelist, for many in this room, likely does not require an introduction, but there's one in my script, so sir, you will get one. Dr. Robert Bullard is a distinguished professor of urban planning and environmental policy and the founding director of the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice at Texas Southern University. He is often called the father of the environmental justice movement. Welcome, Dr. Bullard. To his left is Jade Begay, who works at the intersection of Indigenous rights and climate and environmental justice, shaping national and international policy. In 2021, Jade was appointed by President Biden to serve on the first White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And there's a total of 4 members from that council, including Dr. Bullard, in the House tonight, so well represented, close to 20% of that council. Jade is also a research fellow developing climate data on Native communities in the US. Welcome, Jade. And last but certainly not least, Leah Thomas, who made the trip out here from LA and landed very early this morning, is an activist known on the internet as Green Girl Leah. She educates on the intersection of environmental issues and social injustice, and is the author of the Intersectional Environmentalist, How to Dismantle Systems of Oppression to Protect People and Planet. She is also one of this year's Forbes 30 Under 30. Welcome, Leah. All right, one quick housekeeping note before we go on. At the conclusion of our discussion, we will have a short audience Q&A. To submit a question, please either scan QR codes, like that one, and fill out the online form, or you can fill out one of the provided note cards and someone from the Tishman staff will come around and collect it. All right, it's go time. Are you ready? All right, so this question is for everybody. Let's have a quick sort of introductory framing. So the bipartisan infrastructure deal and the Inflation Reduction Act have together presented an opportunity to update our nation's infrastructure and undertake new projects that can mitigate climate impacts, help us adapt to a warming world, and of course, reduce emissions. In fact, just last week, the Biden administration announced more than $800 million in grants to improve transportation infrastructure and make it more climate resilient. And those projects are everywhere from Davis, California to West Memphis, Arkansas, to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. These and dozens of other projects can make life safer, healthier, and more sustainable for everyone. This panel is focused on those last 2 words, for everyone. What would it look like to each of you to build in a way that is equitable? And I'll start with you, Dr. Bullard.
Well, first of all, I think, sorry about that. First of all, thanks for the question. I think it's important when we talk about infrastructure and building for all to acknowledge that a lot of the infrastructure that has been built in many ways intentionally to not be fair, just, and equitable. And I would call that infrastructure apartheid. So we have to dismantle. In order for us to get it right this time, we have to make sure that we build in equity into that process. And I'll give one example. If you look at the bipartisan infrastructure law, $1.2 trillion, a huge part of that is transportation. Highways have been one of the major dividing features that have kept, that have divided communities, destroyed communities. Transportation, public transportation like buses and trains. Here in New York City, the idea of bridges not allowing the height so that buses can go across into the burbs, or highways that cut through people of color communities that go in straight lines as opposed to going around, destroy business corridors, stable communities, because it's assumed that the land is cheap and there won't be any resistance. So we have to make sure that this money that's being pushed out now, that will be transformative and not built on inequity. I wrote a book called Highway Robbery. I wrote a book in 2004, 20 years ago. We still have highway robbery right now. So we have to monitor every nickel that's being pushed out and make sure that the money that goes out is used, an equity lens, a justice lens is used to track that money and to make sure we are not building on inequity and making sure that we're not repeating the same mistakes of the past. I'll stop.
Jade, what does getting it right look like to you?
I really like this question. Also, I'll just do a little promotion. There's an upcoming book, What If We Get It Right, that is going to have a lot of authors and contributors in it. I am one contributor, and it's on its way. So we can only say little bits right now, but that's a longer in-depth exploration into this question. But when you ask that question, I think about what Anna was sharing a moment ago, when she was sharing some of like the EJ principles, the EJ goals, self-determination. I think that's a huge piece for especially Indigenous communities, achieving self-determination through getting it right with good implementation of all of this opportunity with these federal policies. I think about, and on the self-determination piece, I think about, what you're talking about, Dr. Bullard, when it comes to how tribes, Indigenous communities, of course, were left out of how infrastructure was built, but even more so, we were left out of infrastructure being built. I mean, my community, Navajo Nation, 30% of the nation is without electricity, running water, and we're still trying to meet that need. So I guess I step into the imagination place of, well, if we get it right, then as Anna shared, we're ending oppression, we're ceasing pollution, we're ceasing the racist infrastructure that has left us behind. We're creating safety for workers. Also back to the communities I work with, there's so much opportunity in conservation and land management in these federal policies. So when you ask, what if we get it right? The land back movement is, it's just, we've done it. Lands are back into Indigenous hands, and we're fully resourced and fully equipped to manage those lands the way that we self-determine.
Thank you. Leah, what does getting it right look like to you?
Well, both of those answers were so amazing, so I'll just add a little bit. I self-identify as a climate optimist because I really believe that we have the solutions to so many of the issues that we're facing, and there are local heroes that might not have, they might not even go on Instagram. I hope they don't. They don't really need to be on there. But I want those grassroots environmental justice organizations that have radically imagined better futures to have the funding that they need. So I'm really excited that we're in this long overdue environmental justice renaissance where we can talk about billions of dollars in funding for environmental justice. And I want that to go to the people that have been advocating for environmental justice for a really long time. And I think that also connects to education. I think it's really important, even in K through 12. I come from a line of teachers and folks that work in the public school system. So I want to make sure that students can also be a part of the process. So if I were to radically imagine what would it look like if we got it right, I would want students running around learning about sustainable transportation and things like that, and infrastructure in a way that feels really exciting and fun, because sometimes, even as an environmental scientist, it's not so, fun to learn about. And I want the people who have been doing this work to get the funding that they so desperately need.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bullard, I want to we just spent a lot of time talking about what happens if you get it right. I think we need to talk about an example of when it was gotten wrong. So a couple weeks ago, you and the Transportation Secretary, Mayor Pete, were in Alabama, in a place that's very close to your heart, because of a highway expansion that did not take everybody in Alabama into didn't think of everybody when it was being executed. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in the Shiloh community in Coffee County, Alabama?
Yes. Yeah, I was born in Elba, Alabama, South Alabama, and my family has owned land in Elba, out in the rural area. 10 years out of slavery, 1875, my great-grandmother and father, Peter and Lucinda Hammond, acquired 240 acres of prime land. We don't know how they got it, but they got 240 acres in 1875 doing Reconstruction. Land's been our family since then. Our policy in our family is don't ask, don't tell. We don't know how they got it, but they got it. Well, anyway, the land was flat. It was farmland. Our land is timberland. And in 2018, the Alabama Department of Transportation was expanding the highway. It was a 2-lane highway. They were going to make 4 lanes. They went through the Shiloh community, which was flat. They elevated the highway, made it 4 lanes, turned the drain systems down on the community. I'm not making this up. This community has been flooded since 2018. 6 years been flooded. So it meant I got a call saying, Bobby, you need to come home. Now, anybody that calls me Bobby, I know they're from Elba. I went down there in July, and it's a horrific example of transportation racism. And what it's done is it's destroying people's land. It's flooding. When it rains, it floods. The land is sinking because of subsidence. The sewer system is backing up because they're on septic systems. In other words, these folks own land, and they've survived slavery, Jim Crow segregation, but yet the highway that's using public dollars that was built in 2018 when we had another president. Yes, they took care of not letting the road flood, but didn't care anything about black people flooding. And so I said, I don't usually make New Year's resolutions, but I did this year. I said, I hereby resolve in 2024 will be the year that Shiloh gets justice. And I said that, and I told the community, people that I went to school with, I said, I will take you all the way to Washington, and we will stand on the steps of the United States Department of Transportation and say, if Pete Buttigieg does not come to Shiloh, we're going to say that USDOT do not care about black people drowning. And I gave an ultimatum, and he came. He saw, and what he saw was horrific. Now, this is the worst case of highway robbery. That highway and that flood is stealing inheritance. You talk about since 1870s up till now, wealth. You're passing down, everybody's living out there, inherited that land. So this is theft and using tax dollars. So it's war. I took my veteran friends, I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran, hoorah. We landed and we say we're gonna get justice. Now that's the short answer. We are determined to get justice. So there's monies for reconnecting communities. There's money in USDA for infrastructure, for rural septic systems, water systems. There's money for addressing infrastructure, legacy infrastructure that's creating environmental problems, flooding. And Alabama, my birth state, won't apply for the money. So, but we're gonna force them to fix that project. We're gonna force them to fix it. Now that's what we're gonna do.
And just to pull out a couple of themes of your earlier answer and then this is, I think a lot of the time when we think about infrastructure and building, we think about building on top of what's already there, updating, retrofitting, those kinds of terms. But what I'm hearing in a lot of what you're sharing with the audience is that there are some places where you're not retrofitting, you're not building on top. You need to build anew.
Yes, build anew. What has happened is that the people's septic systems has basically been, they have to flush them out. It's created a whole set of problems. The houses are sinking, the foundations are cracking, their walls, their sewers is backing up into their bathrooms, into their sinks. And so what has happened is that a highway infrastructure has created a cascading of problems that's destroying an entire community. So we're gonna have to bring housing, Department of Housing and Urban Development, Department of Transportation, USDA in terms of rural septic systems. We talk about Department of Energy in terms of weatherizing of homes, solar panels. We're talking about the whole of government approach that's monies available for the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And some of us have been lucky enough to get monies now under the EPA and other programs for communities like Shiloh. When I started this way back in 1979, there was no money for environmental justice, but today there is. The problem and the challenge is we must make sure that the money goes to the right places. Money follows need as opposed to money following money and money following power.
Jade, let's talk a little bit about these same themes in the context of Indigenous communities. A good bit of your work is in researching the ways that Indigenous and tribal communities are understanding electrification. You've given a TED Talk on building climate solutions around communities using their knowledge and experiences. Can you tell us what you found in your research and how the data is informing the ways you interact with different communities?
Yes, I can. And I need the help of my trusty little phone here because I'll admit I kind of slacked. I didn't send my slides in time, but I'm going to share with you some of the data findings. But just to speak to, why we did this. Collecting data in Indian country is pretty hard. The reason for that is, one, we're, as I mentioned earlier, very isolated. It's hard to get to tribes and get the word out. Well, it's not impossible, but it has challenges. Also, when you ask the question, are you Native American on a survey? Imagine the responses we get. yeah, people who can want to and just feel like claiming that identity, they can. And that really messes with our outcomes. And so it's taken a while to get to the place where we are now, thanks to the team I get to work with. I'll just shout out Dr. Stephanie Freiberg, who's built an amazing infrastructure around how Native people are now collecting data. So before the data is, or the questions, the surveys for whatever topic is being pulled on, there's an entire set of questions around your identity. Are you tribal? Are you, do you have a CIB or are you a citizen with a tribal nation? Are you a state tribe? Is your tribe not federally recognized? So yeah, there's a process of questions that then get us to kind of understanding who is responding. So yeah, that's part of what it takes to even be able to understand our behaviors around political issues, or how we are engaging with federal policy or state policy, and also how we're being impacted by climate change, for instance. So yes, there's all this barrier around collecting data. So that was figured out, and then we took a look around and we were like, there's no national survey or climate polling, national poll on how Native people in the United States are impacted by climate change. So let's do that. So that's what we're working on. It's been 2 years of doing test surveys, and we're in a place where we're analyzing our data right now, so I don't have the report to share with you. But as we were building this, IRA passed, and all this implementation is happening. But I think, and maybe this is something we'll get into a little bit more, but it's like is what is happening now even effective? Is the outreach effective? And we're like, or how can IRA be effective? What happens if we get this right? But our question was, are people even aware of this? Do they even understand these terms that are being used in these policies? Let's take electrification, for example. So focusing on energy, we built a survey on energy issues specifically. So we have in this poll questions like, where do you get your energy for your household from? 41% of the people taking the survey got or are getting their energy from fossil fuels. Not surprising. We asked, do you consider your household energy to be clean or dirty? 40% said dirty. We asked, let's see, how familiar are you with the term electrification? 54% said not familiar at all. Oops, I didn't take a screenshot of the other one, but we asked, do you know what the Inflation Reduction Act is? And, the answers, to not our surprise, were higher on the spectrum of no. So even before we begin thinking of how is this working, I think we need to have a deep reflection around, are they absorbing what's been going on politically for the last year or two? And how do we communicate what's happening so that people can then engage?
Let's get into that. So, and I think that draws on both your expertise, Jade, but also in Leah's. So I'm going to bring you both into the conversation. First, in saying, how do we get this information specifically to Indigenous communities for you, Jade? And then more broadly, I'll sort of reframe the question a little for you, Leah, and bring you in. But what's the what's the information transom that has to be crossed for the Indigenous communities you work with, Jade?
Yeah, well, I think we can just go ahead and say that the federal government agencies, no shade, but kind of shade, they're failing at communicating what's happening. I think I find myself in either, in Indigenous communities or Indigenous spaces, and I ask people, the IRA, or I'll say something like, the IRA, and they're like, Indian Relocation Act. And so that was number one communications fail on their part. But there is definitely a gap in how they're communicating what they've done. And what they've done and what they're doing, thanks to the work of many of the people in this room, is amazing. It's historical. I think we can, agree to that. And if we don't take advantage, there's a huge, missed opportunity feels like an understatement. But I think if we want to get it right on the communication side, we're going into communities, we're looking at the data, we're going into communities, and we're showing up and really, speaking to people on their terms. And that's what I've been doing. I've been on the road pretty much this whole year, going to tribal conferences, and I've created texting tools to text people in rural communities because they're not always online, or internet, because of infrastructure issues, is not always available or accessible. So SMS was a good solution for tribes and Indigenous folks. So it's really thinking about how people access information. We put flyers in IHS clinics where Indian Health Services, just going where people are. But also being very non-wonky or not wonky with the language. So I think today I was with a team brainstorming around some of this stuff, communication around IRA, and it was it's free money. Let's just put it in plain terms. It's just get the money. But that's I think what part of it is about.
So Leah, as a person who has created community online, but is an expert at messaging, how do you use the power of social media, of the intersectional environmentalist community, to help amplify the signal here, both for Indigenous communities, but beyond? There's all sort of BIPOC groups around the country, credit financial institutions that need to know that this money is available and to plug it into their communities. What can be done through online tools to get the word out and to not have to rely on policymakers to make the policy and then also get the information to people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the environmental movement definitely has a little bit of a communications issue, to put it kindly. And I remember I went to school in Southern California, but I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, a little bit outside of St. Louis. And I remember going to school, doing environmental justice research, learning about the climate crisis, and then coming back to the Midwest, talking to my family in Arkansas and Missouri, and them looking at me, it's like, what are you saying, Leah? And that's when I got the idea that, what's the point? Obviously, it's very important, so there's a point, of all of this climate science if the everyday person can't understand what's going on. And if we want to address environmental injustice, it's important that the everyday person knows what's going on in their community. So you can say the same thing in so many different ways. I know I always talk about intersectional theory and intersectional environmentalism, but that's 12 syllables. It's very long. Intersectional environmentalism. So you can really say the same thing. And sometimes people in academic spaces will say, oh, well, you're dumbing down information. And they're saying it in a way that is not kind. But I think it actually takes a lot of skill to be able to translate these, really complex issues into something that different communities can understand. So it's not dumbing down information. It's approaching that information and research and the communities that you want to interact with empathy and communicating in a way where you're meeting them where they're at, just like you said. So I started using social media because, again, I was going to school in Orange County, California, and the Black population was like an asterisk. We weren't even 1%. And I yearned for a historically Black college and university. And I remember going on Instagram and seeing outdoor Afro for the first time and realizing, okay, my people are out there. I might not be with them right now. And that's really relatable to a lot of people of color around the country that might be living in super white communities or spaces, but online they can find the communities that they've imagined. So when we started Intersectional Environmentalist, we created a coalition of about 20 different people, researchers, climate creators, educators, policy folks, etc. Everyone from folks like Patty Gonia, not to be confused with Patagonia, the outdoor drag queen, to folks like Jose Gonzalez at Latino Outdoors or Queer Brown Vegan, etc., because we wanted to make sure we could kind of deploy this coalition of people to talk to their communities in ways that were culturally competent about environmental justice or intersectional approaches to environmentalism. So I also just want to give a shout out to design because of where we are. And the fonts that you use, the colors that you use are so important for climate communications. And I love to geek out and look at the posters of so many different movements of the past. Even the font that I'm using on my book cover is from the I Am Man poster. So even just getting creative with the fonts and the colors that you're using to meet people where they're at. And honestly, I'll show up wherever. I mean, I wrote an article in Playboy. I was just at Coachella trying to get people to learn about environmental justice because I don't just want to preach to the choir. And I think that's really important when it comes to climate communications.
Dr. Bullard.
Okay, let me jump in. There is no substitute for organizing, educating, getting into the community, pressing the flesh, whether it's dealing with voting, registration. There's a lot you can do by getting into the communities. This ain't rocket science. I've written 18 books over the last 40 years. It's just one book. Don't tell anybody. Housing, transportation, energy, health, disaster, clean energy, all of that. The communities that we work with in terms of our university, now all universities are not created equal. There's some that parachute in communities, there's some that work with the community. We don't parachute in. So when we talk about breaking it down, the community's leaders, many of them have PhDs in living. They can tell you with your PhD how you need to do this and educate you. So when we talk about getting the messages of the IRA or the bipartisan infrastructure law or Justice 40, when we do our workshops and training, they come out of there knowing, and they can go into those rooms, whether it's the city, the county, or the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or with their state representative, and tell them, the school board, tell them about clean energy buses, electrifying ports. They can tell you about how we're going to get this solar for all. And we got one of those solar for all grants, Bullard Center and Clean Energy Fund of Texas. We got $156 million the other day, partnering with our community organization. We got the $50 million Thriving Communities Grant Makers Program for Region 6, partnering with a community-based organization in Houston that we helped start 10 years ago. Understand that when we talk about explaining and doing, the partnerships that we're talking about is building that knowledge base from the ground up, intergenerational, so that when the executive director of the community-based organization come there, who's usually may not know a lot about the techie stuff, the GIS, the whatever the technical stuff is, bring a +1, and that +1, we hope, and not being ageism, a young person that can manipulate the data and manipulate. That's how we are building our movement out and getting the money. You know what I'm saying? The Inflation Reduction Act is $369 billion with a B. $60 billion in there for environmental justice, another 60 for clean energy. We've never had that kind of money. What we have to do, our Justice 40 money, Bezos Earth Fund called us and said, we're gonna give you $4 million. Our Bullard Center, and they gave Deep South Center, Dr. Wright, $4 million to work. So that's $8 million, and we have between our two centers, black centers, and we're not apologetic about us being black, and we work with black community, we also work Hispanic, all of them. But our core organizations deal with black people, because most black people live with black people. We didn't decide that's what we're gonna do, but that's the way it is. I'm talking about down south. So what we have basically said, we're gonna work with our communities so that the power resides in the community, and the community can go after the money and decide who they're gonna partner with. All the money now is floating all over the world, and there are universities and organizations that couldn't find a black community with a Google map, but they wanna partner with us. They call us and wanna partner with us. We tell you, no, thank you. Understand, we have power, and we should not be timid or shy about using it and saying no to that. That's not online, that's in their face. This is in your face organizing and mobilizing. And when we have to meet virtual, we do. But we have resources, and thanks to foundations. I know Robert Wood Johnson in the room. We have money from Robert Wood Johnson to help us build out. Thank you. Build out the community part. And when you build out the community part, the universities can step in, and it gets easy to do this work when you have trust. You can't buy trust, you have to build trust. We work with organizations with 10, 15, 20 years, and they still are partners. That trust is there. And when you put a proposal together with the community as an equal partner, not a silent partner, not a junior partner, you can get money now, because we got people reading proposals saying, well, that don't seem like no real partnership. That website is 2024. There are little things, letter of support don't necessarily mean that there's a partnership. I could go on this, but we have to expose the fraud that's out there. Call it out and stop it from happening, because a lot of this is going for the money, and it's not gonna make transformative change. We want transformative change, because we may never have an opportunity like this for billions going into communities that have been forgotten and left behind and left out. So we have to fight on the front line for this.
Can I just say one thing? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Bullard. I think just communicating about it, period. I think, and I will challenge some of the larger environmental and climate influencers in the world to talk more about these opportunities. Because I think, Dr. Bullard, how many of these grants are coming out a day? It's crazy.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I know we're breaking the rules on interpretation, but it's really hard to track all of them. And so I think we just need as many people as possible talking about all of these opportunities as much as possible. Not only are there these grants for infrastructure, sewage, and everything from sewage and heat pumps in your house, which is basically AC and heat, to larger, massive infrastructure projects, but there's funding for, I've seen one around trust building with tribes, trust building initiatives. So it's really incredible what is out there. We really do need more help talking about it.
And
Chime in on that.
Leah, you just relaunched your organization, Intersectional Environmentalist, with a focus to drive support to grassroots and environmental justice groups. So, take what Jade gave you and tell us how your work is going to start to address that gap.
Absolutely. I think something that was really interesting, and I'll be transparent, especially with everything that's going on in Palestine, my trust in the federal government and a lot of climate folks' trust in the federal government is at an all-time low. And it's hard to hold that in one hand while also holding the historic nature of the billions of dollars going towards environmental justice in this country. And I will say specifically for a lot of Gen Zers, there's a distrust and a disinterest in the federal government, which is so frustrating because, again, we're in this environmental justice renaissance where there's so much money out there. And just to give some backstory, the Biden administration invited me and some other climate influencers or online educators to the White House because they were saying, we have all of this funding, but we don't know how to reach people. Tell us what to do. And it was a really interesting situation because we were primarily creators of color. And how can you actually create reciprocal relationships with the people that you want to work with that aren't just extractive? So if I were to give a piece of advice to the folks who are saying, influencers, get this information out there, how can we make sure we're doing that in a way that's reciprocal, is not exploitative, and is also addressing the concerns that a lot of Gen Zers have and distrust in the federal government? But yes, I definitely want to spread the word. And I host IG Lives with different government agencies, and I'm trying. And it is really difficult sometimes, and it's something that I struggle with, to show people the opportunities that are available. But to go off what you said, we just relaunched Intersectional Environmentalist, and we want to serve as movement connectors. We know how to build a lot of people power online and get people to interact and learn about environmental justice through bite-sized content. And the next phase is we want to be movement connectors to make sure that they get to the grassroots environmental justice and intersectional environmentalist organizations in their communities. So we just launched a database of about 500 environmental justice organizations all around the country. Everything from environmental justice that specifically focuses on environmental racism, to also outdoor equity focus groups like Latino Outdoors, Hike Club, Outdoor Afro, and those sorts of things. And that's how we're trying to make sure that we can get the online audience into the real world to get connected with those organizations and build that people power. And then we're also creating resources for educators to use within their schools, because a lot of students are saying, we're learning about environmental justice on Instagram and TikTok. Why aren't we learning about it in our classroom? So that's something I'm also really excited about with Gen Zers and Gen Alpha. They're saying, oh my God, I've read one of the 16 plus books that Dr. Robert Bullard read. Why are we not reading this in my classroom? So I think that's a really cool thing. It's not a competition between or comparison between online action or in-person action. Where I'm at right now is how can we transform those millions of people that are consuming information about environmental justice online into in-person action and getting them connected with grassroots organizations. And I'm trying to figure it out and would love help from y'all.
It's interesting the generational piece that you mentioned, especially with regards to how younger people feel about the federal government, because another aspect of the money that's flooding the U.S. now to deal with climate resilience is the American Climate Corps, which they're accepting applications now, and the first cohort is going to be out in June. And this is an opportunity for a new workforce to have a hand in improving their own local communities. I'm a little bit worried, based on what you just shared, that they're not going to get very many young applicants. So Leah, I'd love to hear a little bit from you, but also from you, Jade, about, is this an effective way of creating equitable transformation? So that's one point. Maybe that's for you, Jade. And then are we going to have young people take the Biden administration up on that offer, Leah? So I don't know, maybe we'll start with you, Leah, and then we'll go to Jade.
I mean, I hope so. Yeah, I really, really do. I mean, I do think a lot of young people are excited. I know the Sunrise Movement has been posting about it as a win. So there are young people who I'm sure will take them up on the offer, but I think, again, it gets back to that communications issue. So figuring out how can we reach the most people. Sometimes when we see programs like this roll out, it's a lot of white people who might be applying for some of the programs. So how can we make sure that diverse communities understand the opportunities that are available to them? So that's something I've been noodling on. Thank you. That's something I've definitely been noodling on, and I think social media can be a really powerful tool.
I think that I look at it from the communities that I come from, and you all have probably heard of this movement, the land back movement. I think about it in terms of that, and what, as you were saying, this initiative is to build a workforce for jobs in environmental justice or in conservation, in building the infrastructure, meeting the infrastructure workforce needs that are coming around rebuilding or ushering in, all this rebuilding or building. So in terms of my communities, I think about, we want all this land back, and that's great, and we're gonna get there. I know it. It's already happening in many cases. And because we always need to be thinking about what's next. Once we have all this land back, what happens to that land? We can't just let it sit, because we know if we don't tend to the land, if we don't manage lands, it could overgrow, it could lead to fires. So we need land management. We need people in our communities, especially Indigenous communities, and I know that this is a desire of a lot of young people, is to come home, is to go back to closer to their communities, closer back to their traditional lands. So I see the Climate Corps as an opportunity for young people to get into those conservation jobs, to become hopefully those people who will manage those lands in the future, and who will be running the workforces in our communities, who will be leading and sustaining the projects that we build in this moment and in the years to come. If back to your original questions, if we get it right, those jobs become careers and lifelong, very dignified jobs where people are living in dignity with good wages in their homelands, living out their self-determined lives.
You want to have a
Yes.
quick add-on?
I'm optimistic. I've worked at, I said majority of my career, I worked at PWIs, predominantly white institution, and HBCUs. And I know more about HBCUs because they're in the communities. And we have no problem getting young people into these areas when there's resources available. McCrory Group Foundation here in New York gave us $2 million to start Environmental Justice Climate Corps for undergraduate students. And we have students coming through that program, going into the careers that we're talking about in terms of environmental careers. The fact that our HBCU Climate Change Consortium, and I'm gonna make a plug for it, and I'm biased, we have been able to build a relationship between our community-based organizations, our community, and our universities to transform communities in terms of cooperatives, organizations, businesses, in terms of land ownership, small farmers. When we talk about having Sankofa, looking back and going forward, let's go get it. Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, Dr. Wright, she got one of the Environmental Justice Thriving Community Centers, $13 million to do training, technical support to communities. We got the $50 million to give out grants. Between our two, we can make the money go to the right places, the organizations that we have been working with. The Soul for All program, because of technical support and partnering with the Green Bank, the Clean Energy Fund of Texas, which is which is a green bank that is a black bank oriented. Understanding that when we partner with the right mindset and the right organizations, the communities can benefit from the resources. We're not going to back away from this money that's available out there because that's our money. And we deserve to get it back, and we deserve to put it back into the ground and have it turn over investing. We're talking about investments for the future. I'm a boomer, proud of it, still fighting, still standing. But millennials, Gen X, Y, and Z, Zoomer outnumber my generation. You're going to have to take it over. But you need to be equipped to deal with all these things that are out there coming at you, and not close up the camp and walk away. We need you fighting on the front line, fiercely fighting, owning it. We can't have your feelings get so hurt so easily that you're going to give up and cry, go off and pout and say, I'm done with that. No, we're not done with that. This is our country. We want this money coming back, plowed back into our community investments. When they put $50 million down in the ground, that's an investment. That's money owed. That's money owed. And if we don't look at it like that, then we're just not going to get a dime of it. We're going to say, well, other people are going to get the money. That's our money. Let's go get it.
All right, so you kind of anticipated my last question, which is what is giving you hope right now? Jade and Leah, I'm going to have you guys marinate on that for just a second while I remind everybody that there's going to be a little bit of time for questions from the audience. Again, you can submit your questions via the QR code. On the screen, there are folks on YouTube. You can also submit questions, and in the audience, we have a friend named Jen who can collect cards from anybody who would like to query the panel. So with that, Jade and Leah, what is giving you hope right now, and who would like to go first?
I think the students outside are giving me hope. People who are boldly advocating for Indigenous folks worldwide, for Black and Brown folks, and the liberation of all people and the planet. I'm heartbroken by what's going on globally, but I have so much hope that so many students are making connections. I went to a school in Long Beach, and I was talking about my book, and it made me smile because my book came out like 2 years ago, but some students are like, we know this, actually. How does this relate to this topic and this topic and this topic? And I can't wait for the books that they're going to write and the work they're going to do and how they're going to advance environmental justice. So I know I'm almost 30, okay, but the children are our future, and I am just so hopeful.
I really do like the first question. Again, if we get it right, and what I see happening that's right now, to your point, Dr. Bullard, is the rise and the stepping up of my peers and my colleagues in strengthening our movement's capacity to see that we get our money and that we get it to our people. I see that happening. I'm just going to take this opportunity to share that and also shout out the Tishman Center because, yes, they have an EJ fellowship that I was a part of. I was in the first cohort of that, and in that fellowship that actually just ended just a few months ago, was formed it was a prototype, and then it became, it was all about design, right? So it was a prototype, and then it became what it is now, and will soon be a fully formed EJ strategy firm working to create nexus between government, philanthropy, and frontline communities so that we can see this climate policy implementation through. And it's called the agency, and I have some colleagues from that group here, and so that gives me hope. I get to work on that right now, and yeah, I am really excited about this moment in time where we can strengthen, whether it's grassroots organizations, or mentor youth into becoming entrepreneurs, to become the developers that are rebuilding our communities, or getting people jobs in managing lands and implementing Indigenous ecological knowledge. So all of that everything that's happening right now is filling me up and making me go.
That's great. I'm gonna really quickly answer this for Grist too, just because Grist is 25 years old, and for that entire time we've been chasing the prospect of federal climate legislation, like writing about the ivory-billed woodpecker or a Sasquatch or something like that. And now we have to shift, and it's exciting to have to shift to being able to do and keep track of exactly what the three of you have been talking about, just like how is this money being spent? Is it going to the right places, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a really, really exciting moment for environmental justice and climate resilience. And so that sort of segues us into the first audience question, which is, if you could change one thing about the Inflation Reduction Act, what would it be? Jade, it's the name, right? Because when you said the IRA to your communities, they said the Indian
No, I'm not that petty. But it is let's blame Joe Manchin on that. Let's see, I think it's the concessions, it's the green technology that's not proven safe. Again, we're talking about not creating harms that were done by past infrastructure. So why are we playing with carbon pipelines and carbon storage and utilization? It's experimental. We don't want to harm communities. And so we could just do without that whole part. Right, Bob? Yeah.
Ditto. When we said we will fight like hell to make sure that the good stuff stays in, but at the same time, we will push back those false solutions. Hydrogen hubs and carbon capture storage. And some of those things we said no. And they're trying to push it off on some of our communities as community benefits. We say no, there's no benefit to that. It's like poison laced with sugar. Might taste sweet, but it'll still kill you. We say no. If we could change that, we say no. But again, that was the deal that was cut. And again, we say we're going to fight to get the good stuff going forward, and we're going to push back against the bad stuff. That's our position that we've taken.
We could use students' help on designing solutions to stop this stuff.
I'm going to have to ask that question. What gives me hope is that intergenerational mobilization. I have hope and I have faith. But my grandma would tell me, faith without work is what? Dead. We have to work. Work, work. Everybody needs to work.
All right, next question from the audience. What are some data or information metrics that can help decision makers or planners measure impacts in their work to ensure the benefits from federal, state climate funds reach disadvantaged communities?
The White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, WHEJAC, and there are 4 of us here. There's a committee, a work group called the Scorecard, and that scorecard is supposed to track the benefits and the efficacy of whether or not the money is going to the right place. That's the Justice 40. Justice 40 means 40% of the benefits as we accrue to a green energy, as we move to a clean energy transition in the IRA and bipartisan infrastructure law. 40% of the benefits are supposed to go to what they call disadvantaged communities. We didn't like that, but that's what they gave us, disadvantaged communities. Well, they're saying benefits, they're not saying dollars. So it's all fuzzy wuzzy math. And so we have to have our own metrics. When I say we, meaning communities, university partnerships, when we pool our brains, minds together and find out what's really happening, that's when we can believe the numbers. Because I've seen some numbers that are coming out of some of these agencies, and it's looking so rosy. I'm like, I don't know if that's coming into those communities. So we have to have watchdogs to watch.
How are we doing on time? I actually can't read that.
It says 10 minutes.
Okay. Another question from the audience. How do communities reconcile with the political timeline of the Inflation Reduction Act in relation to their own priorities and processes while still honoring and centering a creative emergent process?
This is the emergent thing. Yeah, I would say this is the emergent thing. Also, it's kind of not. Haven't we been working for this for a long time? So I also, yeah, I think if somehow this is not what you've been working for, then I don't know where you've been, because I've been in the climate justice EJ space, learning from mentors and elders for almost, it's getting a little past a decade. And what we're getting right now is what we've been asking for decades.
Yeah, I agree. What we have to do, those of us who are in the position in terms of the grant makers or whether the technical assistance centers, is to work warp speed along that we call the righteous roadmap to Justice 40. And all of the organizations and the communities are not at the same pace. There's some that have been ready for 10 years. That money can come out the door right now. There are others that you have to use that technical assistance center monies to get them in the position to handle federal money. This is not foundation money. You can go to jail for federal money. And I'm 77 years old and I'm not going to jail for nobody. So what we have to do is we have to get the community organizations ready and do the training. How do you manage, have your accounting systems, have all your, everything in place, reporting, and in terms of making sure that everything is correct and assume that you're going to get audited. Now, as I said before, that's how you're going to move them along. And for those who don't want to take federal money and you're leery about it, step back across the line. And we will identify those who are. And here's the other part, leveraging private foundation monies to support the federal money. That's the partnership that we're talking about, with foundations now stepping up and saying there are things that we will do that will enhance the organizations that are out there doing, the organizations and networks that are doing together, because there's monies for organizations to come together to form collaboratives to go for the big bucks, 20 million or so. But again, there will be additional monies that you may need to supplement that with foundation money, where you can be more flexible in the things that you can do to support. It's about being creative, not letting any wall stop you from getting what your organization can excel if you had the money. And I tell people, you'd be surprised what you can do with money. I mean, you can hire staff, you can hire consultants, you can do a lot of things that our organizations have never had that opportunity. And they've been doing fantastic work over these decades with a little or nothing. That's what we have to do, is support. And our universities, and I'm talking for HBCUs, the ones that we have connected with for the last 20 years, they are willing, ready to work as partners. Not to lead, not to organize. Our organizers are the best. But when we want to partner with, we are powerful when we come together. We are very powerful. And we can compete with anybody when it comes to the communities that's driven by the community. Now that's the work that's exciting right now, but it's still challenging. But it's exciting.
And that's where just, I mentioned it very briefly and maybe swiftly, but, and that's where some of us are stepping up. We are being emergent. I mentioned the agency group that I'm working with, and I might need help, guys, with the website. I think I wrote it down. But seriously, like, this is to support people in this moment, to create this connection, to do these trainings, to do the matchmaking between grassroots organizations and potential philanthropic support, additional support between, getting communities' feedback to the government about this reimbursement period or timeline does not work for us, so we need more time. So there's also that opportunity and the emergent organizing need around telling these agencies that, oh yeah, this is not going to work, so we need you to make it work. So wait, what is it? Sorry guys, blowing it on the.
I think somebody in the audience might be trying to help you.
What is it? Oh, the agencygroup.org. So look it up. We're here to help.
All right, last question of the night, and it is for you, Leah. How does the movement build power from cross sectors to create an intersectional strategy to capture not only dollars, but actual systemic change?
That's a big one. Yeah, I really like this question. Before going out into climate communications, I was working in corporate sustainability at Patagonia for a couple years on their comms team, and it was a lot of fun. And for people who are distrustful in the federal government, but like was said earlier, the money is ours, so we need to be taking it. But I think corporations can play a really important role in supporting grassroots environmental justice organizations by wealth redistribution. And I think Patagonia has a really great model for that, and donating proceeds directly to grassroots environmental groups, sometimes faster than the federal government can. And the same thing can be true for foundations, et cetera. So yeah, how do we build, what was the word? Collaborative?
Power from cross sectors.
Power. I think just recognizing everybody's strengths and what they bring to the movement. It might look different. You might also have a different theory of change than somebody else. But even though you have a different theory of change, the movement would be so boring if everybody had the same theory of change. So making sure you can find unlikely allies at times, whether it's the religious community, whether it's corporations who want to get involved, whether it's some really rich family that has a foundation that wants to give it away and they just need some guidance, whether it's content creators or activists or whoever it is, and just recognizing people for the specific talents that they bring to the movement and allowing everybody to be a part of the movement, not gatekeeping people outside of it, always providing accountability throughout that process. But yeah, it's really cheesy, but I think the movement is so much better when we approach the space with empathy and allow people to show up exactly as they are with their strengths and bring that to the movement.
I think that is a wonderful sentiment to end with. So thank you so much, Leah. So I'd just like to end by thanking everybody gathered here today for bringing your energy to the room. And I'd also like to thank the panelists, Dr. Bullard, Jade, Leah. You all traveled a long way to bring your knowledge to us, and I think it was a really, really, really amazing discussion, so thank you so much. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this event. So we heard earlier from the American Farmland Trust, Patagonia also sponsored, as well as Frey Vineyards, and our media partner was WNYC. A couple pieces of information about the event overall again. It was presented in partnership between Mother Jones, Grist, and the Tishman Environment and Design Center here at the New School. To sign up for Mother Jones's free newsletters, subscribe at motherjones.com/newsletters. Grist also has newsletters, and you can get them at grist.org/subscribe. We are also in the middle of a membership drive at Grist. So in order to ensure that our content remains free and accessible to all our readers, we never paywall anything. So please consider helping us continue that tradition by going to grist.org/membership. And for a limited time, all donations will be doubled. So Jade mentioned this a little bit earlier, but yesterday on Earth Day, the Tishman Environment and Design Center here at the New School proudly announced the new 2024-2026 EJ Disrupt Design Fellowship Cohort. As Jade mentioned, she was a part of the pilot cohort over the last 2 years. And I'm excited to share with the new cohort that she will remain an advisor, you know that, right? To the new cohort of environmental justice leaders who are part of this fellowship. You can visit their website to read the press release and learn about the fellowship. So finally, it took a village to make this event happen. So thank you to the facilities staff and the student workers at the New School for making all of this possible. We truly appreciate you. Everybody have a fantastic night, and thank you to everybody who joined us online as well.